go.
Are you going?
Yep, go.
Alright, so this is in continuance of everything I was saying before. So right now we're trying to compile all the arguments I had before. We're going to do little sound bites for each one. And we're going to try and understand a method of understanding and testing reality. It's all about experimentation and how to achieve ideal conditions for any sort of experiment. So the first thing we need to do is relate that there is a truth and there is a falsehood, at least many falsehoods. There's probably more falsehoods than there is a truth. We had to like to suggest one thing was true would be the relevant data in an experiment. So when we set up an experiment, we're doing it in relations to try and test something objective, even subjective, so but less subjective, more objective. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to outline misconceptions and how those things come about really quickly. They're usually expressed because of people's adulterated ideas or things that are not necessarily true that we tend to believe in. And that could be anything. Oftentimes it's religion. Oftentimes it's our own implicit belief systems that are impeding our progress, further understanding some form of objective truth. So the first thing we need to do is understand that majority of the things are false. When we test something, it doesn't mean whatever we're testing lines up with what we're suggesting. We're just simply testing it. A lot of people like to make believe that God is the only objective, subjective, absolute truth. And maybe that's true. However, we have yet to set up a proper experiment to observe those conditions, and usually it's based on a presumption of something that we don't absolutely know, such as the history of our faith or any sort of idea that's expressly against the ideas that we already believe. So we have to kind of test that to be valid. And unless your God is absolute reality and the absolute results of your experiment, if it's set up correctly, we don't really want to entertain the ideas. We're just going to say, more than likely, everything that we assert or presume is likely, at least at some angle or to some measure or degree, false. So that's another presumption. We're just going to set that aside for now. And we're going to say, okay, when we're setting up something to define truth, first off, we need to know what are falsehoods. So if we really want to put on our armor of God, we really, is what I call it, we're going to go ahead and just kind of study logical fallacies. There's great websites out there. There's tons of large data sets of almost all. There's infinite, but almost all the major and popular logical fallacies out there. So, but on the armor of God, we have to know the devil's traps. We're just going to set that over there. You can pause the audio at this point and go study those. But there's got to be continuity to find the truth between arguments. So when we establish an argument, we know that doesn't necessarily mean that what we're arguing is all the way together, all true. So most of our science that we come up with doesn't really argue things. There's relational sciences such as we call it relative mechanics, which is like, Einstein, Newtonian, classical mechanics, those kinds of things where you need an A and B relationship to kind of draw a line and have continuity between these things. It doesn't always express every little thing. The in-between measures is going to be more or less quantum mechanical, meaning like to get to the root of the definition of the meaning of something, to get the fundamental aspects of something, and the further on down we go, the more we understand that we're only talking about one thing. And usually when we talk about that one thing, we're talking about its measurable ground states. So the very zeroth of the definition or the very basis of something. Oftentimes people predict things in atomics or subatomics or sub-subatomics or sub-sub-sub-subatomics. Those things where it's just deeper and deeper and deeper. Quarks from protons, etc. Protons from atoms, etc. So how deep you want to go fundamentally, we just establish a definition of what we're talking about. And that's pretty much what the quantum mechanical aspects of something is. So we can do that. There's no quick way of relating those things between these sciences. We have statistical, which means we're our data and we're plotting it. Each time we do an experiment, it's not always accurate to the point we're doing it. Sometimes we do something wrong, we're making an error, etc. And then, of course, our interpretations of the data, which is where we're going to focus on today. When we focus on what we are looking at or what we perceive, we're establishing an argument. It doesn't mean it's altogether true. We're just coming at it, and then we have to interpret it. Can't really interpret things that we don't interact with all the time, so we can't see, but we try. So we're trying to understand the basis of reality. We're going to suggest that people's ideas of reality are based on their beliefs. So we have to believe something to even get this far. Get the proper belief. We have to interpret it, and it's based on our own experiences. If we never did the experiment, we don't know the answers. So just because people tell you one way or the next, I want to kind of cite not just because I think we've talked about the foundations of science and its relation to truth as we understand it. That's the beauty of science, is that we can kind of understand it. We can grasp some of it, but we can't altogether harness everything. There's no ultimate science that maintains everything, keeps it all together. If we say there's something out there that maintains everything and keeps it all together, it's usually our implicit belief system or our religion that's getting in the way of us progressing in science. So you're going to have to pick one. I mean, you can always believe anything you want. I don't think it really, unless someone can show me a formula or a system that's actually testable that allows us to go to the next level or the afterlife based on some belief or not, there's really no way of testing that. And we're going to more or less come across that there's a bunch of religions out there, even people that we say believe the same things. After we start talking about it, more and more down, lower level stuff, we're going to figure out that a soul doesn't mean a soul to someone at the same church or mosque or whatever as we believe. We don't have standard definitions for all this stuff. We're just relating with each other. And so our models and religions that we come up with for understanding this absolute truth is really, we're just modeling nature and reality, and we're trying to figure it out. And our hope is that we have the right God or the right reality that we're trying to model after. So if we can understand what's going on in nature, then we don't have to make up things, or our minds won't be allowed to trick us as much, and then we won't fall to making up new things and lies, and then we can all progress together with some form of truth, even if we interpret it differently, the results. But we all have the ability to do the test ourselves. So, oftentimes when people rope us into their beliefs, they'll say, well, you have the ability to test it, but they'll give us a false mode of testing. So that's why we accurately document our experiment. We say, well, you can do it too, and these are my results, and this is my interpretation of the results, and these are my conclusions. You can do it yourself and come up with something totally different, or we can figure out if you did the experiment the way that I set it up. So that's pretty much it. That's science in general. You might say that's boring, but when someone says, well, pray to God and test God, or test my model of prayer out and see if you get the same results. Odds are you're not. Odds are, even if you say the right mantra or prayer, you're not going to prove that your God's real. But that's what a lot of people do to rope us into their belief system, whether false or make-believe or whatever they want to rope us into, a dangerous way of thinking. Well, if you just pray this prayer and something happens as a result, but if you pray the prayer out loud and a phone with AI is on and it's reading it, when you open your phone, it gives you an advertisement. There's so many tests nowadays that you don't even know you're setting up. And if you don't know how reality works, then you're probably setting up an experiment doomed to failure. You're probably going to be doomed to the depths of hell, so to speak, if you don't do the right experiment and you interpret its findings incorrectly nowadays with so many advancements in science that we can't even keep up with them. So, some people think that when they say something in their house and no one could possibly ever know it, and then they turn on their phone, something's being shown to them. They don't understand how the algorithms on a phone work and that they're selling your data all the time.
Right.
And you might just think, well, this is God sending me a signal. This must be true. And it's like, well, there's huge amounts of risk and danger in some of these things to continue to follow. Data science, the data science, the algorithms don't even know what they're doing. They're being pushed along by AI, and next thing you know, you're worshiping an AI God, and the very say you're not, and then you make believe with it, and just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not real. And so that's the same argument that religions for a long time have had with us.
Mm-hmm.
That if you can't see my God, it doesn't mean he's not real, or she, or whoever. And so, if you don't test something right, you don't set it up right, and I mean, how do you know? I mean, if your religion even says, thou shalt not test your God, like some thing, then, I mean, that's definitely provable at that point that you don't know who your God is, and no one really does. No one knows who their God is. But there's certainly danger in it, and science, not to say that science is the one and only God, but our job is to test reality, test everything. Even the Bible would say something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thou shalt not test your God, but test everything in nature to find out if it's real or not. Suddenly, well, you can't test God if you can't test it. So, if we can't question our God, if we can't question our science either, then I don't know if it's really worth following.
Mm.
So, those are just my opinions. You don't have to do it, but, there's certain danger, and if we're just going to fear the unknown, and you're going to fear a God that you can't even understand or relate to,
No.
then how do you know you can have a relationship with that God?
Mm-hmm.
Really big question. I mean, some people believe that the highest achievement they can achieve before death is to have a relationship with their God, or that's a requirement for them to get into the next level of afterlife. We should at least question it, because what if your God is evil and he's just manipulating you, just like some religious cult leader?
Mm.
How do you know that your religion isn't a cult? Did you test it? Did you read its history? Did you understand it, the many different varied forms of it in its early years? Why is it so uniform now? Who canonized your texts? Who made you
You have 1 minute remaining.
Who made you the ultimate authority and understanding? Do you understand your ultimate authority? Is your ultimate authority God? Does your God allow you to think for yourself? Does your God give you a brain so that you can use it? These are questions that you should know, or at least pretend to know as you move forward in your experiment in life.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope this was helpful, at least a little bit, and I hope it was entertaining. There's a lot more to it, but, I can't cover every branch of science in 15 minutes or less, so I hope this was helpful, and you're assured that we don't have to have all the answers, and we don't have to know our God all the way. And we can certainly worship our God or characteristics attributed to our God that doesn't necessarily mean that we know what we're talking about.
Mm.
That's all I have. Thank you for your time. This is theologian Taylor Taranto at your service. Have a nice day. God bless you.
Thank you for using Global